Thanks for having me here. My name is Mark, as you already know. And my presentation today is we'll discuss about Bitcoin and this very important topic of morality. Now, I'm not here to talk about lightning and side chains and all the kind of technical things about Bitcoin, because we have enough talks. We always hear things about Bitcoin, about its technical terminology. I want to talk about Bitcoin in terms of how we use Bitcoin. Because Bitcoin essentially is just a tool. Mankind from the very beginning always invents various tools to achieve our goals. As you can see here, we invented spears, plows, various different tools we use to achieve our goals. This is essentially what separates us from every other animal, our complex use and invention of various tools. But these tools don't just stop with physical tools. We also have very abstract tools, even language, math, logic. These are also tools for expression, sharing ideas. Essentially, this is what human beings are capable of. However, tools are just that, tools. They are amoral. They don't dictate how it's to be used. We dictate how it should be used. And that being the case, we need to have, or we've always tried throughout history, to form a robust framework whereby we use these tools. Hence why we have laws which says you can't use a knife to kill someone. That's essentially a moral statement about how we can use or how we should engage with the tools around us. However, we need to look historically about this tool we use called money. How we have tried to engage with our economy and how we've tried to discuss about the most moral and fair way in trying to govern our societies. And I want to look at this very briefly from the aspect of history. We need to always look back at history. What have we done in our past? In order that we can learn from the past and hopefully not repeat the mistakes of the past. But I'm going to do a different thing today. I'm going to look back at history in reverse. Because I think there's an important thing to learn about history in hindsight. Here we have an individual, we all know him, Karl Marx. And we have, you could say, an environment whereby he came about and whereby he put forward his thesis of what he felt was a moral framework we should use. And here we have a statement. He says, accumulate, accumulate. This is the Moses and the prophets. This was Karl Marx criticizing capitalism. So he continues, industry furnishes the material which savings accumulate. Therefore, save, save. So he's critiquing the fundamental premise of capitalism, the whole purpose around, in his view, of what capitalism is all about. He continues, i.e. reconvert the greatest possible portion of surplus value and surplus product into capital, hence the word capitalism. Accumulate for accumulation's sake, production for production's sake. So essentially, Karl Marx is looking, obviously critiquing, what was prevalent in his time, which was capitalism, and noticing or highlighting that the fundamental bedrock, in his view, of capitalism is the accumulation of capital. And in his view, this was devoid of what is also important, which is the human element of society. So things he observed was exploitation of the working class, i.e., in his view, capitalism, by definition, exploits and extracts value from workers. That's from his views. Alienates workers from their work. Again, this was a view of capitalism from in Karl Marx's ideas. Capital accumulation and concentration. Another view, another aspect of capitalism that he was critiquing was the view that capitalism essentially consolidates wealth in the hands of a few. Also, the commodification of everything. Again, because the premise of capitalism is the accumulation of capital, therefore, every avenue will sought to do that. Therefore, treating everything as another form of acquiring capital. Everything can be put in a place of capital. And finally, the economy has, he made an observation, which is a true observation, that the capitalist system necessitates boom and bust cycles. And he went into detail about how capitalism or the free market, in his view, leads to the costs of products being driven down to the cost of production, which necessitates a reset, i.e. boom and bust. So, and finally, and this is an important one for Karl Marx specifically, he viewed capitalism specifically as just an extension of imperialism, i.e. it's just a mechanism for the imperial forces to subjugate other people, which you can almost say is a larger scale of the smaller idea of those of capital exploiting those with work and labor. The point here is not to promote or not, the point is this is how Karl Marx viewed capitalism, which is why I believe that Karl Marx is a child of capitalism. Listen carefully. He was a product of capitalism. What was prevalent in his time led to his ideas being formed. Here we have another friend of ours. This is my version of Adam Smith. So Adam Smith, can you see? Yeah, you can see him. Adam Smith, he was at a different time. The life or the experiences he had was different to Karl Marx. He was at a time of feudalism, whereby essentially power was consolidated or associated with land ownership. So he had his own views. What did he say? Here's an example of a statement from Adam Smith. The pride of man makes him love to domineer. So he has a different take on things, or a different focus. And he talks about the nature of mankind to just dominate. And nothing mortifies him so much as to be obliged to condescend to persuade his inferiors, i.e., those of capital don't want to negotiate with their workers. They would rather subordination than cooperation. He will generally prefer the service of slaves than a free man. So he's critiquing the system of his time. Just like Karl Marx was critiquing the system of his time, Adam Smith was critiquing the system of his time. And here his comment here is specifically directed towards the owners of capital. In that time it was land, or landowners. So that's his statement about landowners. But he also has a statement about the workers. Under the feudal governments, the many subordinates of the sovereign were, for the greater part, incapable of providing for their own subsistence. So he's observing about the reality of the working class, or you could say the vassals, those who were on the land of the landowners, and how essentially because of the structure of the system at their time, they were entirely dependent on the landowners. They weren't independent. They were obliged to beg of him a subsistence either by wages or service. So their whole survival depended upon the wages they got from their landowners or the services they rendered to them, meaning they weren't independent. They were entirely dependent on landowners. But here's the crucial part. In this situation, we cannot well expect from them that vigor of exertion which is necessary to render any service very productive. And this is another common theme with Adam Smith and their capitalism, is that their focus is different. Their focus tends to be on productivity. We hear the word quite a lot actually, especially in these shows which talk about corporations, productivity, driving down costs, more efficiency. So his focus is not the moral one which Karl Marx was trying to portray, but his one was of efficiency. If you're just a servant on the land, you just do whatever you need to do just to get by, just to make your landowner happy, and then you don't have to do any more than that. But what he's suggesting is, actually, in that model, you're not actually getting the most out of your system. You're not getting the most out of what you have to offer. So therefore, productivity is hindered. So he had a different look at things. So we can look at it here. We have a summary here of some of the ideas he had. Basically, economic inefficiencies of feudalism. So again, we look at, you could say capitalism, but much like Karl Marx mentioned, if you compare capitalism to feudalism, which is what he was doing, feudalism is inefficient, and this model is more efficient. The question is, efficient to do what? Acquire and accumulate capital. Lack social mobility. Because you're just a vassal on a land, there's not much more you can do. How do you progress and grow and move from the working class to the middle class? How do you progress in life and improve yourself? There isn't much avenue for that. Unless you're given land or awarded land, you are essentially subordinate to your circumstances, you could say. Restrictions of trade and commerce. That was another interesting characteristic of that time that he was living, that open markets and trade wasn't really a thing. Why? I serve my master, the job's done. Everything is consolidated in the hand of landowners, and there isn't much need for competition. The inhibition of individual freedoms, like I mentioned earlier on. And this is an important point, again. The issue of dependency and poverty. Feudalism depends on exactly that. You have to have the poor, and they have to be in poverty for the system to work. You cannot have feudalism if everyone has enough finances to run their own business, to do their own thing, to buy their own land. Feudalism just doesn't work. It depends on poverty. So, again, one could argue that Adam Smith is a product of feudalism. Feudalism gave birth to Adam Smith. So very quickly, what is feudalism? For those who are unaware, essentially it's a hierarchical system with a monarch at the top, and you have lords and knights and peasants. And it's basically a hierarchy, similar to what happened in early Japan, where you had the shogun and the daimyons and the samurai. Similar kind of situation, but it's hierarchical in nature. And essentially, because the economy was agrarian, it was based on what you could farm. The actual real wealth was attached to how much land you owned. That's where wealth was extracted, which we will touch upon hopefully later on, which is important to think about now as we move forward in the future. What would become the manifestation of wealth in the future? As we are speaking about Bitcoin, maybe that's the answer. But we need to think about that. This is an important point, loyalties. It depended upon the loyalty of your subjects, those on your land being loyal to you. That's essentially what feudalism or its characteristics, and serfs working on the manor. These are kind of the ideas of feudalism. But when I was looking into this topic, one thing that stood out for me is, you think to yourself, okay, if this wasn't in the Middle Ages or what they call the Dark Ages, surely this wasn't always how it was. And it wasn't. If you look throughout history, we have many huge civilizations that weren't feudal. And I tried to embody a picture of every one. We've got up here, we've got the Chinese dynasties, we have the Islamic Empire, we have Egypt, we have Babylonians, we had major cities, civilizations, and they weren't all feudal. So how did they function? I mean, surely they had markets. We have many detailed historical records of complex markets. So feudalism wasn't always how it was. Whereas feudalism came about as a result of something else. What was that? The fall of the Roman Empire. Before feudalism, we had the Roman Empire. And when that collapsed, which we're going to discuss shortly, it left a vacuum, which that circumstance led to feudalism. So you can see here, we can see almost like a knock-on effect. One scenario or situation led to another, which led to another, which led to another. And they all essentially are children of what came before that. Again, which is important for us to think about as we are looking to the future. Because we are essentially children of our circumstances, and we need to now shape what comes next. So with the fall of the Roman Empire, we had the dismantlement of the centralized systems, we had a power vacuum, we had constant invaders coming into the lands. People had to essentially seek refuge and safety in people of power. Who were those who had power? Those who had land. Those who had land essentially bargaining with knights and had almost like small armies. So you can see here that what came in the power vacuum of the Roman Empire, the collapse and fall of the Roman Empire, led to a form of feudalism. Not to mention that certain traditions from the Germanic tribes that came in and whatnot, and the religious castes that happened at the time. So these kind of factors led to feudalism. And who knows, maybe feudalism will come back again, who knows. But this was the circumstances that we were living in. And here we come to a verse in the Quran. وَإِلَى مَدْيَنَ أَخَاهُمْ شُعَيْبًا. Allah mentioned in the Quran, and to the people of Median, this is a tribe, a mini city, Allah sent a prophet called Shu'aib. What did Shu'aib say to them? قَالَ يَا قَوْمِ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ مَا لَكُمْ إِلَهٍ غَيْرُهُ. O my people, worship Allah, you have not God but Him. That's the message of all the prophets anyway. Okay. But he said something else. وَلَن تَنْقُصُوا الْمِكْيَالَ وَالْمِيزَانَ. And do not cheat in the scales. Because obviously in their time they used to weigh things either in mizan, as in weight, or kale, which is like a volumetric measure. When you sell things like a bag of rice, that's a volume. The point was, that tribe was known for cheating in the marketplace. And that was actually a point mentioned to them as to not do that. And this is a very important, I'll bring this ayah because it kind of indicates a cycle we keep on having as human beings. Is that usually before the collapse of a society, they always resort to cheating, specifically in the marketplace. And that characteristic seems to repeat itself over and over and over again. So, what was one of the reasons, by the way, I'm not trying to be reductive to say that every society collapsed because of one thing, but one of the factors that led to the fall of many empires, specifically Roman as well, was the cheating in the currency. Currency clipping or coin clipping was a form of cheating. Because at the time of Shu'aib, they were cheating in terms of when you buy. So I went to go buy my wheat, I want a kilo. So rather than giving them a kilo, I gave them just slightly less than a kilo. They didn't realize. So I managed to accumulate some capital fraudulently. So that was cheating on one side of the scale. But you can also cheat on the monetary side of the scale, whereby I'm getting my exact kilo, but I'm giving you not exactly the amount I'm giving you. You think you are, but you're not. And it happened through monetary dilution of the coins, where it's not just gold, but it's gold plus something else, or by coin clipping. These are various manifestations of cheating in the marketplace. Or fast forward, when we have our gold and we're exchanging gold, gold is heavy, hard to move. Which began in the Chinese Empire or dynasty. Let's use paper. That was an invention, by the way, a very important invention for commerce, making it easier to transact, to have small denominations. So that was a very good one. But the temptation to cheat is just so high that maybe that is no longer pegged 1-to-1. And maybe I can just print up some more. Who would notice, which when done leads to hyperinflation, which leads to instability in the market, which leads to collapse. We see that over and over again. And ironically, the total depegging or the issuance of paper as currency without being tied actually happened centuries ago. I think the Mongolians were the first ones to do it. After the Chinese did this, I think the Mongolians tried to do it without any backing at all. And that one actually collapsed quite quickly. Anyway, so this was a form of, you could say, the old school way of cheating in the market. So we can see a progression, more and more complicated ways of cheating. And then we have the more modern way of cheating, whereby we completely detach. As you know, with the Nixon shock, the money was completely broken from the gold standard, whereby now this dollar is no longer backed by gold, but instead it is formed, maintained, issued, and deleted through debt, either through central banking, which I call the root of the interest banking system, or its branches through high street banking, through high street loans. This is how you issue new currency, through high street loans. And this is the point here where we return back to Bitcoin and the idea of tools and morality. Is that Bitcoin can't be clipped, and a Bitcoin can't be cheated. This is one of the revolutions that I believe Bitcoin offers us, or opportunities, not revolution, but opportunities Bitcoin offers us. It gives us the opportunity to avoid the mistakes of the past, to avoid the opportunity of clipping coins. Because if I send you a Bitcoin, I send you a Bitcoin. And Bitcoin itself has properties which helps to maintain fairness in trade. Because remember, this is all about how can we have a more fair and a fair economic model, a model which is, on balance, prevents cheating. So what are the properties that I suggest? What are the properties that I think that allows and facilitates fairness and morality? One of them is a limited amount. That's very important. Because the ability to issue currency on demand is one of the forms of cheating that we have today, whereby those who haven't earned the money just get the money. Whereby we have a limited amount where we know exactly how much is in supply, and if I have Bitcoin, I know exactly how much of that supply I have. It's fair, it's clear and open and transparent. Censorship resistance, another thing which is very important. I can engage in this network without anybody stopping me. It's not dependent on my class, whether I am a landowner or not, whether I'm a lord or not. As long as I can access the internet, I can access the network. And I can receive, I can send Bitcoin. It's open. I can actually build systems. I can build a business on Bitcoin without permission from anybody. It's borderless. This is beautiful. I can transact to anyone on planet Earth without even considering what country or jurisdiction they live in. I just send, and they just receive. Might not even know where they are, but I can transact. Decentralized. Again, another a property which you can almost say this allows or facilitates the above. Fair distribution through mining. Again, rather than just those who have the banking license to issue new currency or the permission to issue new currency, actually, only those who actually work for it get it. Which again, brings back to the issue of morality. What's more fair? Those who earn it get it, or those who have privilege get it? Doesn't require interest for issuance. And this is a very important point that we can move on to. Because why is that even an issue? What's wrong with interest? Fundamentally, interest is a mechanism, one of the mechanisms whereby you can, at some level, inflate the supply. You can act as though there is more than there really is. And this, in essence, is a form of distorting the mizan, distorting the scales. Because money is essentially a tool. That's all money is, a tool. Money isn't something you eat or food. It's just a means to measure how much value or capacity I have, and I'm going to give that to you to acquire the things I need. That's all it is. Whereas the distortion of money is equivalent to distortion of measurements. Imagine trying to be a scientist, trying to measure the amount of chemicals you need for a certain reaction, but every time you pick up a beaker, it's different. The measurements are different. Maybe it might work here and there, but it's not feasible in the long term to actually run any kind of system where your means of measure is constantly being manipulated. Especially when it comes to the issue of inflation, our current fiat system incentivizes exactly that predatory behavior. Because if you have a monetary system which is built to inflate, it incentivizes not to lend except to lend at interest in order to retain value. If I lend you some money and I get it back in 5 years' time, if by definition in 5 years' time that money would have lost value, there's no way I'm going to lend you that money unless I either retain that value or gain more. So therefore, fiat money encourages predatory behavior just to survive. The thing is, you might not even want to do it, but you have to do it. I have no choice. How can I feasibly lend you money to buy a house and say, give me back the money in 10 years' time? There's no way. In 10 years, that money will be half its value. Whereas a deflationary money, or at least the money that maintains its value, lending is almost like they're doing you a favor. I no longer have to look after the money by putting it in a safe place. By definition, by lending it to them, they're looking after it for me. And at the very least, I'm happy just to get it back as it was, because at least I'm getting back what I gave. Or in a Bitcoin term, in a sense, I'm getting back probably more than what I gave. So it encourages actually forgiveness and charity. If I gave you some money, and by the time I get it back, it's worth the same or even more, maybe they can't pay back all. So I'm like, okay, don't worry. I can still buy what I could have bought 5 years ago on what you've given me back. I'm happy. So actually having deflationary money encourages more moral behavior, rather than the inflationary one, which encourages immoral behavior. So Bitcoin is the most morally aligned money we've ever had by its properties we have. However, I believe we can do more. So in the Islamic model, we have the system of what determines to be fair trade. And I tried to find a word which kind of embodies what that is without having a stigma of saying Islamic finance, because when people hear the word Islam, it's like, oh no, Allahu Akbar, and all that kind of stuff, people get frightened. But I think the word, or the term, capitalistic collectivism kind of encompasses the theme, i.e. there's nothing wrong in the accumulation of capital, as long as you are considering the collective in that process. If you look at what Karl Marx was highlighting about capitalism, it was the accumulation of capital devoid of a human nature, or devoid of the people around you. It doesn't matter if they are suffering, if they are poor, if they can't pay their rent. I just want to accumulate capital. Whereas there's no reason why you can't accumulate capital and be fair. So here's a statement. Anyone who owns a courtyard land and their people are hungry on that land, then they have been abandoned from the protection of Allah. This is a statement of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, whereby he's encouraging those who have capital to factor in the fact that they have people underneath them who they are responsible for, that they should look after. And if they are hungry on your land, you'll be asked about that. Another one, I think many people have mentioned this kind of principle. If you give, you become rich. I actually saw a video the other day. He was a non-Muslim. He was stating that in his experience, the more he gives, the more he gets back. And we'll talk about that, why in the future, in a minute. But the point here is that the encouragement of those who have to recognize that there are those who don't have. And then we should try our best to let them share in what we have. And finally, so that it isn't something that is passed amongst the rich. In the Quran, Allah mentions a particular ruling, and He mentioned the reason why the ruling is what it is so that this money doesn't become something that just circulates amongst those who are rich. Something to think about for Bitcoiners. Something to think about. We are propagating and advertising Bitcoin. We want everyone to hodl. Hodl Bitcoin, you can, in the future, be good for you. But we also need to recognize that Bitcoin is for everyone, and we want it to be for everyone. We want everyone to have access to this. We don't want it to be something that only is amongst the corporate elites who are Bitcoin. In fact, we want everyone to have access to Bitcoin. So, very quickly, in Islam, we have something called zakah, which I will put forward is the exact opposite of usury or interest. Because interest, by definition, where a person is rewarded with money because he has money. That's the reward of having money, because you get money because you have money. Whereas zakah is the fulfillment of responsibility of those with money to those who don't have money. So very quickly, all forms of wealth, and this is I want to come to conclusion now, all forms of wealth naturally degrade through entropy. Our houses, our clothes, everything degrades. So at some level, the owner, he has his wealth, and he has to pay to maintain his wealth, which basically by being rich, he is feeding everybody else. His car needs replacing the tires, everything by definition. All his wealth has this characteristic that has to be maintained, except, which makes the wealth circulates, except for money. Money doesn't deteriorate, it just stays there. So interest is an unnatural process, because when you have the money, like you have a house, when you have the money, it actually sucks up the value of others. Because you let the money out, it draws in the money from the rest of society up to yourself, which makes it a very unnatural process from what we just mentioned before. Whereas, if you look at charity, that's actually a very natural process. Why? Because money naturally flows downwards to those underneath you, who in turn use that to buy things which comes back to you. So it's actually a natural process and replicates the exact same process of wealth. So in conclusion, in summary, a baseline or a suggestion for a more moral economy is that which is clear, that which has as its basis a clear, fair, unambiguous form of trade, where everyone is clear on what's happening, what you're receiving, what you're giving, not corrupted. Receive what you earn. So therefore, if you earn lots of money, it's because you actually achieved it. You earned it or you was gifted it. You're able to add to the economy, not just extract from the economy. And also you give. We should encourage ourselves to give in order to receive. And finally, don't make Bitcoin something that circulates only amongst the rich. So that's my conclusion or my proposition for why I think that we need to consider as Bitcoiners, specifically, how can we build systems that is a more fair and equitable way of building your economy and not, this important point, closing point, and not just repeat the mistakes of the past. If anyone wants to read anything more about why I believe Bitcoin is halal, I have a write-up on my website. You can have a scan of that, inshallah. Other than that, I've finished. And thanks for having me again. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak here today. And thanks for being here. Take care. Thanks. Bye-bye.